Module 4, Metrics Misalignment Examples. There are thousands of metrics misalignments. That's not the point. The point is not to go and find all the metrics misalignments. You would never be able to do that. What the point is to highlight that it's impossible. It'd be like sticking your fingers and toes in a dam where the water's broken through the dam. And you can't go around and try to mitigate and catch metrics misalignments. You just cannot do that statistically either. So the only point of this is that if you want to collect evidence of personalized student achievement, the main thing to grasp is do not count any metrics misalignments and make sure you're not doing that. And if you use the personalized butterfly metric system and you follow that to the T, you will not be. You'll just be collecting assets, personalized student achievement assets. So keep that in mind. Here are 9 metrics misalignments, but there are thousands of them, and there's no way to stop them unless you use the personalized butterfly metric system. You automatically are exclusively collecting assets. You're exclusively celebrating what the student and the student's family can do. You're exclusively celebrating what you as the teacher or administrator can do. It's an asset-based system. It's not for everybody. If you disagree with the asset-based system and you could control what you're doing in your classroom or your school building, then that's fine. You know, don't do the personalized butterfly metric system. But if you want to focus on an asset-based system and you change a couple of things in the personalized butterfly metric system, then all these things will creep in. In other words, there are no zeros or 50s. There's no averaging. There is just collecting assets and putting those in your portfolio. So it takes care of all these. So I'm going to go through these really quick because they're irrelevant if you do not count them by design and you count instead the students, and we need to count every single student and all the things that they bring to the table across multiple intelligences, social intelligence, cross interdisciplinary learning content areas, because our students have so much to offer that we have not collected the evidence of. Disruptive educational leaders use educational administration research methods to require the historical system to show statistical significance for what it's claiming to measure. That sounds like a mouthful of marbles. That sounds like a lot of technical talk. But basically, if you couldn't even get it defended on an introductory level doctorate dissertation, and you couldn't show statistical significance for it for that, then we need to stop kneeling to it and subjecting our secondary education students to it, regardless of what everybody else is doing. Number 1, abolish metrics misalignment of consistency on secondary education report cards and replace with personalized student achievement. Why? Well, averages can measure consistency. Averages cannot measure student achievement. Mathematically, averages cannot measure student achievement. Cannot. So why do we think that in our classroom, or that in our school building, or that in our school district, we have to take a knee to a historical public educational system metrics misalignment that was never required to show statistical significance for what it's doing or claiming to measure? You don't need to. You don't need to take an average, especially if you are a tenured teacher in the United States of America, go in your classroom, do the personalized butterfly metric system. If you're a principal, maybe run it by your boss first. If you're a superintendent or a governance team, we would love to come out and do a free workshop for you. If you're a permanent principal in a high school, and several times per year, you have workshops and meetings to try to figure out how to beat disproportionality, how to do something different. Well, here's an idea. Let's measure student achievement. Do not trust the historical public educational system. It was not required to go through the steps and processes that we are required to go through today to even have a peer-reviewed journal published. It was never required to show statistical significance. So we need to stop counting the apples. We need to stop averaging the apples. And of course, apples and oranges is just a figurative example. And oftentimes, we're talking apples and oranges. And we need to stop. We need to stop doing that. Apples and oranges are two very, very different things. So if you're passionate about something, because I know we all are, I am, and everybody is about something, you still need to make sure you do not let it creep into the personalized butterfly metric system. Because if you do, you will have metrics misalignment. So if one thing is important to you, then handle it in a different way. Keep it off your secondary education report cards. Averages cannot measure student achievement, period. We need to transition into asset-based butterfly metric system. Everything worth anything from Ford's assembly line to Jordan's 32.7% three-point shooting percentage average, Ruth's 34.2% batting average, Dyson's vacuums, Formula 409, Disney's theme parks, and Einstein's theory of relativity all came from thousands of test trials of complete failures, zeros. And if you averaged Formula 409, you would have 408 zeros. And Formula 409 would be looked at as a total failure, even though Formula 409 is obviously an asset to a lot of people, and a lot of people use Formula 409 and has produced insane amounts of wealth for Formula 409. Notice the averages that are in here, Michael Jordan and Babe Ruth, their report card would say Michael Jordan, 32.7% actual grade, rounded up to a 50, had every opportunity to stay after school to make up work but chose not to, has missing assignments, could improve responsibility, things like this on the report card. 32.7% Michael Jordan, rounded up to a 50. And same with Babe Ruth. In fact, if you put all these people, even Einstein, if you put them into the system, nobody understood Einstein, even. If you put them into the system, these would all be failing grades, every single one of them. So you need to make sure, if you're a tenured teacher, if you're a teacher, okay, you need to make sure that you get away from averages. I don't know what it is, but the most effective teachers in the world, they still sometimes want to go and take an average, and you gotta stop taking the average in the personalized butterfly metric system. We are measuring and memorializing personalized student achievement, and our students are not average, not even close. This student put the wrong heading on their paper. And that's one of the most obvious conformity issues. So the teacher's throwing all the papers in the air saying this does not count, even though this is from a TV sitcom, this scene. Another example of conformity, when I mentioned cars parked a certain way in the senior high school parking lot, we don't want to get away from that. We need to run tight schools, but we just don't want to put how they park their car on the report card. Same here. If the teacher doesn't like the heading, then we need to find different ways to deal with that. Compliance is the next level after conformity, and we do need compliance. We don't need to run a penitentiary system. Regardless, compliance has no place on the report card. If you really want to put a compliance or conformity or any of these kind of things on your report card, maybe put them in the comments. But when you computate your report card grades, keep compliance off of it. If a student comes late to your class, deal with it in another way. Do not put that on the report card. Because if you put that on the report card, you're really not measuring personalized student achievement. So it's still important to have compliance, conformity to a certain extent. We don't want people to come to work or come to school so depressed that they feel like they're in a penitentiary system. But we don't want to control behavior with grades. There's nothing wrong with workflow other than when a student has strep throat the last 2 or 3 days of the marking period in some classrooms. How could they go from high honor roll to failing? Well, the reason they go from a high honor roll to failing is because everybody goes around and decides how they're going to computate their grades, and they don't know how to measure anything. And teachers and administrators are awesome, but it doesn't mean they are going to statistically significantly measure anything. So then the teacher's in a situation where they're trying to manipulate their grades towards the end of the marking period. And a lot of it is tied to workflow and the crux of workflow. We're not preparing students to break rocks all day. We're preparing them for enlightenment, and we're preparing for jobs that do not even exist in 21st century things, and cultivating their minds. Having them do a bunch of busy work is not helpful. If they miss one day of school, attendance is so important. But if they miss school, that is not to go on into the butterfly metric system. Only assets. And again, if you don't like that, that's fine. Nobody said you have to do the personalized butterfly metric system. But we have the academic freedom to say, here it is, and this is something to consider. And perhaps for some of you, you feel like you waste your time and you want to try something new. Well, give it a try. Give the personalized butterfly metric system a try. One thing's for sure, do not talk about politics, religion, or homework at the holidays if you come from a family of educators. If you want to do homework, go ahead and do homework, but realize that homework, we could talk about homework for hours. Okay, it's a hot button, a polarizing subject. But homework oftentimes measures socioeconomic status, resources, things of this nature, and is not always equitable. And if you have a student where their parent is working 3 or 4 jobs, and you have another student where their parents are teachers, and they can hire a bunch of tutors, there's a big dichotomy between homework. And make sure you're using your instructional time, block scheduling, win time, after school, all this time. If you have your students in rows and you're opening up to the textbook and you say you need more time and you give a bunch of homework, you should really reflect on your own instructional practices. But if you want to give homework, go ahead. Just don't deal out zeros and 50s. Stay inside the personalized butterfly metric system and make sure that you're exclusively collecting assets and putting those in your portfolio. And again, an asset would be anything that is 70% C minus or higher. Because anything less is a liability, it's not an asset. The most obvious grade killer is a zero. If you are in a failure weighted system, which the historical system is failure weighted, and there's 1 0 or 150%, that's the most obvious grade killer. But there are thousands of grade killers as well. You don't really need to worry about grade killers if you're in an asset-based system and you stick to collecting evidence and memorializing your teaching effectiveness and what the students can do. To teach administrators, building level administrators, or even the superintendent of schools about barriers to entry and how to eliminate barriers to entry in services and how to be more culturally responsive is not mathematically going to help. It's not possible. Why? Well, there's so many barriers to entry that there is no um, possible way to eliminate all these barriers to entry. Here again, oftentimes difficulty rides on the back of high expectations. And high expectations, I mean, what's wrong with high expectations? High expectations are great, but too often the high expectation is totally disconnected from the learning objective or the content area standard. And then we're just infusing more difficulty into an already difficult system. And we need more rigor, less difficulty. And just like the barriers to entry, the slide before, you could never eliminate all the difficulty, all the barriers to entry. So having in-services to do that or be more responsive, those are good. I'm not saying don't do those. We should do those. They will not mathematically help us. The only thing that will mathematically help us statistically is to set up a system where none of these things can be counted and we're only counting assets. So if you do the personalized butterfly metric system and you deviate from it in any way, please do not tell people that you're doing the personalized butterfly metric system because you've just manipulated the system and these things will all of a sudden sneak into the system. We want to collect evidence of what students can do and all the great things that our students and our families can do and our teachers as well. Abolish metrics misalignment, avail of high expectations and replace with rigor and personalized student achievement. Avail of high expectations, no credit for you yet, dot, 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 or maybe ever, dot, dot, dot. Resubmit. It's not perfect yet. Okay, for the mastery learning folks out there, I love mastery learning as well. Who wouldn't? Mastery learning is awesome. But it's important that I narrate the slide so there's not a misunderstanding. High expectations, mastery learning, that's all fine and good. That's great. But when you get the asset, do not give the asset back to the student until you have memorialized it if it's an asset. If it's less than a 70%, less than a C minus, that's not an asset. Okay? So go ahead and hand that back. But if it's 70% C minus or higher, memorialize that asset before you give it back for them to resubmit it. The reason why is, well, several things. If there are things that are idiosyncrasies that we all have, we all have, every human being has, every educator has. There are things that are near and dear to our hearts that we all have as educators. There are biases that we all have. Maybe not the biases that would come right to mind, but implicit biases. So, if a student has an asset, okay, or what we normally call work, but I'd rather call it an asset because we don't go to break rocks all day. We go for enlightenment and the opposite of a lobotomy. If they have an asset in their backpack and their name's on it and they didn't turn it in, it's unfortunate. And we can talk about responsibility with the child, but if we've seen the asset and we've witnessed it as the teacher, it's important that we record that evidence of our own teaching effectiveness, and we toot our own horn, and we get that asset recorded inside the student's portfolio. If we had a nickel or a dime for every time we handed back an 80% or 95% to a student and rigidly told them in the mastery learning paradigm that if they didn't resubmit it, their grade would be 0, and here they are, they just handed us in a 95%. Well, the joke's on you, teacher. It's not a joke, unfortunately. It's more of a tragedy. You had the evidence that you're a highly effective teacher, and you threw it away. And you threw, mastery learning or not, you threw all of those efforts away. And so it's important that you find a way to memorialize that. I don't know if that's taking a Xerox copy or a photograph or whatever and putting it in the portfolio. But if you're doing mastery learning, it's very important that we don't have students in that situation, because obviously, or maybe it's not obvious to all the viewers, but it should be obvious, that's a metrics misalignment in and of itself. Say, well, responsibility is important, and it's important in life, and they're going to need it in college, and they need it in their job. That's fine. Keep it off the report card, though. Unless you're going to put val of high expectation grade on your report card for each content area, or metrics misalignment grade, which no school would do. So, for the mastery learning people, there's nothing wrong with mastery learning. It's awesome. But just keep those things in mind. This, I think, from Ice Age, reminds me of disruptive leaders, but it could be building administrators without butterfly metrics. Yes, this is what it is like without a robust system. Without butterfly metrics, this is exactly what it's like to try to run an asset-based system where teachers and administrators have autonomy inside the system. It's important for teachers to have autonomy inside their classroom. It's important for teachers to have academic freedom, total academic freedom. And that surrounds tenure as a teacher. Tenure was created for those types of things, not what we think of tenure for today, or permanent status. But when it comes to measuring things, most educational professionals, as well educated and as smart as they are, and as astute as they are in these things, in teaching methodology and computating their grades, you'd be hard pressed to find any of them to show statistical significance for what they're measuring. And if I showed them, or researchers showed them metrics misalignment 1 through 9 that we just went through, that would be highly offensive to most teachers and administrators. And they'd say, Well, I don't do that, or we don't do that, or we measure student achievement, and even if their student achievement is deplorable, or their graduation rates, high school graduation rates are deplorable, they tell you that they measure student achievement. Well, it's not that they measure student achievement or they do not measure student achievement. It's systematically. This is not a person problem. This is not this person's a bad administrator, or this person's a good administrator, or this person's an effective teacher, or this person's an ineffective teacher. What we have is total chaos inside the public educational system because, number one, the historical system doesn't do what we're claiming it does, which like we talked about, the historical system never claimed to collect evidence and memorialize student achievement for everybody, get all students to achieve, like our mission and vision statements of our public school districts are around the country. That's the first problem. The second problem is teachers and administrators aren't researchers. So without the butterfly metric system, the disruptive leader or the administrator that's aspiring to be a disruptive leader looks much like this picture with the dam and the water and putting their hands and feet in the different holes and the different holes breaking loose in the dam. And in a lot of school districts, administrators are already busy enough. In some school districts, administrators are so busy with daily operations. I worked in one school district, all they do is daily operations. And then behind the scenes, maybe do some work with IEPs and some work with curriculum and instruction, but they couldn't even get close to doing anything disruptive when it comes to student achievement because there's no time. They spend all their time chasing the same students around all day. So whether your school district is fast-paced, slow-paced, large urban school district, small mountain school district, if you have a school district and you're the superintendent and principal and you have a school district of 250 kids in your whole school district and you do all the jobs and you only have 250 students, there's no way you will be able to achieve any of this without a system. Even if you take the disruption, you shoulder it. If you're a disruptive leader and you go from school district to school district and you want to stop going from school district to school district, or if you're a superintendent and you had to move from state to state to state and everybody thinks you're rich because you made $400,000 or $500,000 a year, but you may never work again, and you're scared, or at least concerned for your family, stop being a disruptor. Put it into this system. Make the personalized butterfly metric system shoulder everything we do as disruptive leaders. If you're not a disruptive leader and you're just a teacher, you're not just a teacher. The teachers are the lifeblood of public education. The teachers are where the magic happens. If you are just a teacher, you are my hero. That's where the magic happens. There's no such thing as just a teacher. You can make a difference. If you are a teacher, just one teacher, you go back to your classroom and you do this. You use this personalized butterfly metric system, your life will feel more, you will feel more fulfilled. You will feel like you're not wasting your time anymore. If you're a permanent teacher, you don't need to waste your time. You don't need to go get your grades where they need to be and do all the statistical manipulation and calculate grade after grade. You don't need to do any of that. If you're a teacher listening to this, nobody could stop you from counting the oranges throughout your career. I would suspect you have left so many oranges uncounted that you need to count for the students, but also for yourself. All the phenomenal things that you have done and achieved. Don't let those go uncounted, not for another single day. multiplemetrics.org, personalized butterfly metric system. Make sure you go over to multiplemetrics.org over the weeks, months, and years as we add to the website and add free resources for you. Check it out at multiplemetrics.org.